morning, my friends. The sun is up, but before you rise out of bed, before you let the world pull you in, there's something you need to do first. Call on God. You see, life doesn't wait, but neither does God's power. We've been running on empty for too long, chasing success, chasing purpose, chasing peace. But what if I told you the key to all of it is found when we stop running and start calling? When we wake up and acknowledge the one who holds everything together, we set the tone for everything that's to come. It's time to start your day with the one who knows the way, with the one who empowers. The first thing you do in the morning can shape the course of your entire day. We often find ourselves rushing into the day, consumed by the need to check emails, respond to messages, or jump straight into work. But the truth is, we've got it backward. The most important thing we can do when we open our eyes is to prioritize God above everything else. This simple yet profound act of calling on God first can change everything. When you prioritize God at the beginning of your day, you are declaring that He is the foundation of your life. Everything else that follows is built upon the stability and security He provides. By choosing to place Him first, you are recognizing His sovereignty and authority over your life. This acknowledgement doesn't just happen once in a while. It needs to be a daily practice. Each morning is an opportunity to affirm that God is the center of your existence, and nothing in this world can replace that truth. Many of us struggle with starting the day right. We wake up to the sound of an alarm, and before we know it, we're already on the hamster wheel of our routines. The noise of the world begins to invade our thoughts, and it's easy to forget about the power of starting our day with God. We're conditioned to think that checking off our to-do list or jumping into our obligations is the priority. But here's the reality. None of that will truly fulfill us without first aligning ourselves with God. When you make God the priority, you're making space for Him to guide you through the chaos. You're inviting His presence into every moment of your day. Think about it. God is the creator of everything, the one who has all wisdom and power at His disposal. Why wouldn't you want to start your day by inviting Him into your life? We so often rely on our own understanding, our own strength, but that's a limited resource. God is the limitless source of all wisdom and provision, and by starting your day with Him, you are tapping into that unending supply. Prioritizing God in the morning also means taking time to listen. It's not just about talking to God, but also about being still enough to hear from Him. The world is full of distractions, but when you intentionally choose to call on God first, you make room for His voice to be heard. Sometimes we think we need to handle everything ourselves, but God's guidance is what will lead us to the right decisions, the right actions, and the right mindset. We often miss that because we don't slow down enough to hear Him speak. This practice of placing God first is not about fitting Him into our busy schedules. It's about recognizing that everything else flows from Him. The order of our priorities affects everything we do. When we begin our day by seeking God, we are aligning our hearts with His will, and that alignment sets the trajectory for everything that follows. The peace and clarity that come from spending time with God are unmatched by anything else. It's a peace that surpasses understanding. By calling on God first every morning, we remind ourselves that we are not in control. He is. This recognition keeps our hearts humble and our minds focused on His goodness. We may not know what the day will bring, but we know that with God leading us, we are equipped to face it. His strength will carry us, His wisdom will guide us, and his love will sustain us through whatever comes our way. There's something deeply powerful in the act of surrendering your day to God at the very beginning. When you make him the first priority, you're declaring that he is more important than the tasks you need to complete, the people you need to answer to, or the demands of the world around you. Nothing should take precedence over God. It's a bold statement, but it's one that aligns us with God's purpose and his heart for us. Prioritizing God first each morning reminds us that everything else flows from his grace. In a world that often pulls us in a million directions, making God the first priority is a radical act of faith and obedience. It's easy to get distracted and overwhelmed by the pressures of life, but when we choose to give God the first moments of our day, we are choosing to place our trust in him. We are acknowledging that we need him more than anything, and when we do that, he meets us where we are, ready to lead us, guide us, and fill us with his peace and power. When you call on God first thing in the morning, you are setting the tone for the rest of your day. Our lives are often marked by a constant rush, a need to get things done, to check off boxes, to meet expectations, and to stay on top of our obligations. In the midst of this hustle, it's easy to lose sight of what really matters. But when you begin your day by calling on God, you are choosing to set a different tone. You are choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and faith over fear. The tone of your day is not determined by the circumstances you face, but by the mindset you adopt. And the right mindset comes when you start your day by acknowledging God's presence and sovereignty. When you call on God first, you are essentially surrendering your plans and your agenda into his hands. It's an act of faith that says, God, I may not know what today holds, but I trust that you do. I trust that you are in control, and I invite you to lead me through whatever comes. That simple act of surrendering to him shifts everything. It repositions your heart, your mind, and your spirit in a way that allows you to face challenges with confidence, knowing that God is with you every step of the way. One of the most significant effects of calling on God first is the peace it brings. The world is full of distractions, and we are bombarded with information and demands the moment we wake up. But when we start the day by calling on God, we invite his peace into our hearts. It's a peace that transcends the noise of the world, a peace that guards our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. This peace doesn't depend on our circumstances. It depends on our connection with God. And when we are at peace with God, it becomes easier to navigate the chaos of life with a calm spirit and a steady heart. Starting the day with God also brings clarity. So often, we wake up feeling overwhelmed by everything we need to do. Our minds are cluttered with tasks, responsibilities, and worries. But when we call on God, we invite his wisdom into our day. We acknowledge that without him, we are limited in our understanding and ability. But with him, we have access to divine wisdom and direction. God knows the beginning from the end, and he has the perfect plan for our lives. We assume that we can now live it independently. God knows the beginning from the end, and he has the perfect plan for our lives. By calling on him, we are inviting his guidance into every decision, big or small. The clarity that comes from God allows us to approach the day with confidence and purpose, knowing that we are walking in alignment with his will. Calling on God first also shifts our perspective. It helps us see the day through the lens of faith rather than fear. When we face challenges, it's easy to get caught up in anxiety and worry. But when we start our day with God, we are reminded of his power and faithfulness. We are reminded that he is bigger than any problem we might encounter. And this perspective shift empowers us to tackle whatever comes our way with courage and determination. No matter what obstacles arise, we can face them knowing that God is for us and that he will equip us to handle everything. There's also an element of protection when we call on God first. Every day presents new challenges and opportunities for growth, but it also comes with potential risks and dangers. By beginning the day in prayer, we are placing ourselves under God's protection. We are asking him to guard our hearts, our minds, and our actions to keep us safe from harm and to lead us away from temptation. It's a powerful way to ensure that we are covered spiritually and emotionally as we face the unknowns of the day. But calling on God first is not just about setting the tone for the day. It's about inviting him into every moment of the day. The peace, clarity, and perspective you gain in the morning are not meant to be fleeting. They are meant to carry you throughout the day. When you begin the morning by connecting with God, you set a foundation of trust that will carry you through challenges, changes, and uncertainties. Many times you wake up in the morning and tend to skirt past those challenges. You're not just seeking God for one moment, you are choosing to invite him into every area of your life, trusting that he will lead you, strengthen you, and sustain you in all that you do. This practice of calling on God first is a reminder that we are not alone in the journey of life. We don't have to face the day by our own strength. We don't have to rely on our own wisdom or abilities. When we call on God first, we are acknowledging our need for him. And in doing so, we make room for his power to work in and through us. By starting each day with this act of faith, we are preparing ourselves to face the day with confidence, peace, and a heart that is aligned with God's will. It's a reminder that no matter what happens throughout the day, God is with us, guiding us and empowering us every step of the way. When you call on God first thing in the morning, you are not only setting the tone for your day, but you are also choosing to trust in his perfect timing. In a world where we often feel the pressure to make things happen quickly, to push forward with our own plans, and to take control of situations, trusting in God's timing can feel like a challenge. But calling on God first is an intentional decision to surrender our timeline to him and acknowledge that his plan is always better than ours. It's an act of faith that says, I trust that God knows what is best for me, and I believe that he will lead me at the right time. We live in a fast-paced world that values immediate results. We want things done quickly, efficiently, and on our terms. This mindset often leads to stress, anxiety, and a constant feeling of being behind or not measuring up. But when we call on God first in the morning, we are reminding ourselves that we don't have to operate on our own timeline. God's timing is perfect, and he will guide us through every moment of the day. His plans for us are far greater than any agenda we can create, and by trusting in his timing, we allow him to lead us to the right opportunities, the right people, and the right outcomes. Trusting God's timing is about more than just waiting for things to happen. It's about aligning ourselves with his will. We may have our own plans, but God sees the bigger picture. He knows the road ahead, and he knows what is needed at every step. When we trust in his timing, we release the need for control, and we allow ourselves to be led by His wisdom. This doesn't mean that we stop working or that we stop making decisions. Rather, it means that we approach our day with the understanding that God is guiding us. Our efforts are not in vain because we know that they are aligned with His will. One of the greatest challenges in trusting God's timing is patience. We want things to happen now, and we struggle when things don't unfold as quickly as we hope. But by calling on God first every morning, we are surrendering our impatience and allowing God to work in His own time. This doesn't mean that we won't face challenges or delays, but it does mean that we will face them with peace, knowing that God is in control. His delays are not denials. They are opportunities for growth and preparation. When we trust His timing, we learn to embrace the process, knowing that every moment is part of His perfect plan. The Bible is full of stories that remind us of God's perfect timing. Take, for example, the story of Abraham. God promised him a son, but it wasn't until many years later that the promise was fulfilled. During that time, Abraham faced moments of doubt, impatience, and frustration, but God's promise was always sure. In the end, Isaac was born at the exact right time. God's timing was not only perfect, but also a reminder that His plans cannot be rushed. Just as He fulfills His promises to Abraham, He will fulfill His promises to us in its perfect time. By starting our day with God, we are committing ourselves to trust in His timing for every aspect of our lives. We may not know what the day will bring, but we can trust that God is already there, preparing the way for us. We can trust that He is guiding our steps, opening doors at the right time, and closing others when necessary. This trust allows us to move through the day with confidence, knowing that we don't have to force things to happen. God will bring about His plans for us in His perfect timing. Trusting God's timing also frees us from the burden of comparison. It's easy to look at others and think that we are falling behind or that we are not where we should be. But when we call on God first in the morning, we remind ourselves that our journey is unique. God's plan for us is not the same as anyone else's, and His timing for our lives is different from the timing of others. We don't need to rush or feel pressured to keep up with the pace of those around us. We don't need a test. God is leading us on our own path, and when we trust in His timing, we can embrace our journey without comparison or fear. In trusting God's timing, we also learn to trust His heart. We know that God loves us and that His plans for us are good. He wants what is best for us. And even when things don't go according to our timeline, we can trust that He is working everything together for our good. Trusting God's timing doesn't mean that everything will be easy, but it does mean that we can have peace in the midst of uncertainty. And when we call on God first each day, we are reminding ourselves that His timing is perfect and His love for us is unwavering. In this trust, we find rest and assurance, knowing that God will lead us to where we need to be, exactly when we need to be there. When we call on God first thing in the morning, we are not just inviting His presence into our day, but we are actively seeking His wisdom. The decisions we make each day, no matter how small or large, can have lasting consequences. In a world full of distractions and competing voices, it can be difficult to know which path to take, what choices to make, and where to turn for guidance. But when we start the day by calling on God, we are acknowledging that we need His divine wisdom to guide us through the challenges and opportunities ahead. We recognize that on our own, we lack the clarity and understanding that only God can provide. Wisdom is not just about knowledge or information. It's about knowing the right course of action in any given situation. It's about being able to discern between what is good and what is best. The decisions we face daily may seem trivial at times, but each one adds up to shape our future. When we invite God into these moments, we are opening ourselves up to His perfect guidance. His wisdom goes beyond our human understanding, and when we seek Him first, we tap into a source of wisdom that will lead us in the right direction, even when the way seems unclear. In the book of James, we are told, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him." James 1:05. This verse is a reminder that wisdom is available to us when we seek it from God. It's not something we have to earn or figure out on our own. It is a gift that God is eager to give. But we must ask for it and make ourselves available to receive it. When we call on God first in the morning, we are making that request for wisdom. We are saying, "God, I don't know what today holds, but I trust that you have the perfect wisdom for every decision I will face." Seeking God's wisdom also means acknowledging that we don't have all the answers. It's a humble recognition that our own understanding is limited, but God's wisdom is limitless. We live in a world that often emphasizes self-reliance and the importance of having all the answers, but true wisdom comes when we humble ourselves and submit to God's guidance. This humility opens our hearts to hear from God, to receive His direction, and to follow His lead. The more we call on God and seek His wisdom, the more we recognize how much we need Him in every area of our lives. In addition to providing us with direction, God's wisdom also helps us navigate difficult situations with grace and patience. Life is full of moments when we are faced with tough choices, whether it's a personal challenge, a difficult relationship, or a career decision. These situations often require more than just logical reasoning or advice from others. They require wisdom that transcends human understanding. I want to share with you the important tip I heard last week from the great Eno Dansky. When we seek God's wisdom, He provides us with the discernment we need to make decisions that honor Him and align with His will. This wisdom gives us peace, even in the most challenging circumstances, because we know that we are walking in the path that God has set for us. In calling on God first every morning, we are also setting ourselves up to be more receptive to His wisdom throughout the day. By intentionally seeking God's guidance at the start of the day, we are aligning our hearts and minds with His will. This alignment makes it easier to recognize His voice when He speaks to us, whether through Scripture, through the counsel of others, or through a quiet prompting in our hearts. Wisdom is not just a one-time request. It is a continual process of seeking, listening, and following. When we prioritize seeking God first, we create space for His wisdom to guide us every moment of the day. Another aspect of God's wisdom is the peace it brings. When we are uncertain about the decisions we need to make, it can lead to anxiety and stress. We worry about making the wrong choice, or we fear that we might miss the right opportunity. But God's wisdom brings peace, because when we seek it, we trust that we are on the right path. We can move forward with confidence, knowing that God's wisdom is leading us. and that we are not alone in making these decisions. His peace guards our hearts and minds, and it gives us the assurance that no matter what happens, we are walking in His will. God's wisdom is also practical. It's not just about understanding deep theological truths or gaining abstract knowledge. It's about applying that wisdom to our everyday lives. Whether we're making decisions at work, in our relationships, or in our personal lives, God's wisdom equips us to handle each situation with understanding and discernment. It gives us the ability to make wise choices, avoid pitfalls, and act in ways that reflect His love and truth. When we call on God first, we are not only inviting His wisdom into our lives, but we are inviting it to influence every action, every conversation, and every decision we make. In calling on God for wisdom, we also acknowledge that we are part of a larger plan. Our decisions are not just about us. They are about fulfilling God's purpose for our lives. When we seek His wisdom, we are asking for guidance that will align us with His greater plan and help us live out His will. It's not just about making the best choices for ourselves. It's about being a part of God's kingdom and reflecting His wisdom in all we do.